educating the public in terms of mobilizing the resources that we have to improve the situation, right? And before I leave the session, before I give the mic to Dr. Shaiful back, I would always like to, in these quick opening remarks, I always like to think when it comes to global warming and climate change, I always like to, to think about also the role that, religion, ethics, laws can play to, face the challenges of global warming. Because according to my reading, I could say, the people in the field are telling us that global warming and climate change is mainly due to human factors, right? We are misbehaving to our mother nature. So when we talk about the human factors, then we can talk about the human behavior. And when we talk about human behavior, then we talk about guiding the human behavior. And when we talk about guiding human behavior, then we talk about the sources of guiding human behavior, like religion, law, custom, culture, values, norms, education, and then a lot of areas follow, right? So when it comes to religious role of educating the public to improve the situation in global warming and climate change, it comes to my mind always the Quranic verse in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Dahara al-fasadu fil barri wal bahri bima kasabat aydin nas." That is in chapter 30, the European chapter, Surah Al-Rum, verse number 41, right? Chapter 30 of the Quran, verse number 41. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Dahara al-fasadu fil barri wal bahri bima kasabat aydin nas." Corruptions and violations, if you want, or change has appeared, in land and oceans because of human factors, because of human actions, because of human behavior, right? So as if the climates are good, our natural resources are good enough to feed us, but because we misbehave against nature, we mishandle the nature, then corruptions appear, right? So ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. So now what we need to do, I think what we can do, according to my reading, I hope speakers will correct me later on, what we can do is, in order to cope with the challenges of climate change and global warming, we need to adjust the human behavior towards the mother nature. The only value, I think, if I may say this, the only value that human beings can add to the nature is, to behave or to change, or not to corrupt it, put in that way, to change our behavior towards the nature, right? That's the only value we can add to. So with that, I'd like to welcome everyone to this IWIN session, and hopefully we are looking forward to the answers and discussions and thoughts from our speakers. I'm looking forward, inshallah, to listen to your talks. And thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the program. Shukran jazilan. Back to you, Dr. Shaiful. Shukran jazilan.
Thank you very much, Prof. Raza, our head centuries of IUM Kuantan campus. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns, and this shift may be natural, but according to what Prof mentioned just now, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, but since 1800s, and this is probably primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels, which produces heat-trapping gases. According to the report by United Nations, the past 8 years are on track to be the 8th warmest on record, fueled by ever-rising greenhouse gas concentration and accumulated heat. Today, I think it's important for us to discuss about the diversity on sudden progress of these changes. Is going to be solved instead? Is it rapidly changing? We need some history and prediction of what is going on, and what will be the impact to the world and its population, and how is the root of problem in Islamic perspective, and how to manage it. Before we begin, I would like to introduce one by one our invited speakers today. I would like to introduce first our first speaker, Assistant Prof. Dr. Atika Hassan from Community Medicine Department, Kuliah of Medicine, IUM Kuantan campus. Dr. Atika had received a PhD in Environmental Health in University Kebangsaan Malaysia and had involved in several research projects related with environmental health, such as involving climate change, extreme rainfall and flooding, and comparison of waterborne diseases at pre, during, and post-flood in Kuantan from 2004 to 2018. And her research actually is still going on. How are you, Dr. Atika Hassan?
Alhamdulillah. Okay.
Thank you very much for joining us. Next, I would like to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Rohaida Ismail from Environmental Health Research Center, Institute for Medical Research Malaysia. Dr. Rohaida Ismail is the head of Climate Change Unit at the Environmental Health Research Center, Institute for Medical Research. She is a public health medicine specialist with research interests in health outcomes of climate change, extreme weather events, environmental degradation, and built environment. Her current works are on climate change vulnerability and adaptation, and health impacts of air pollution and rising temperature. Among her accomplishments, she is a contributing author to the UNEP Adaptation Gap Report 2018 on climate change and health. She currently serves as the secretary of the Malaysian Society for Environmental Epidemiology. How are you, Dr. Rohaida? Doctor, how are you? Dr. Rohaida, you're here? I saw her just now. I hope she's still able to connect with us. Dr. Rohaida? All right, okay, so okay. Well, welcome to you, Dr. Rohaida. Last but not least, I would like to introduce our third speaker, Dr. Ramzi Bandika. Dr. Ramzi is the assistant professor from Abdul Hamid Abul Shaman Kuliah of Islamic River Knowledge and Human Science. He received his PhD in Muslim World Issues from International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, IUM-ISTAC. Among his research projects include Sustaining Social Balance and Peace in the Post-COVID-19 Pandemic, a study in the light of Maqasid al-Sharia and the Maqasid Guided Medical Decision Making. How are you, Dr. Ramzi Bandika?
Alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Dr. Shaiful.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Ramzi. Regarding the flow of today's events, we'll begin first with lectures by the three speakers just now, and each topic will be given 30 minutes duration for each speaker to present their topic. And participants are allowed to ask questions, but only through chat box or message. And at the end of the session, after all the speakers have presented their presentation, we'll then shift to the Q&A session in the form of forum, whereby I will choose the relevant and most important question. Probably if there are not a lot of questions, I will try to entertain all the questions to all respective speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me first invite the first speaker, Dr. Atika, to deliver her speech. Thank you, Dr. Atika.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Saiful. Please allow me to share screen. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slide.
Okay. So my title is related to climate change. I will give a little bit introduction about climate change. And actually, Dr. Saiful and also Prof. Abdul Razak already mentioned a little bit the contents, some of the points already included inside my slides, but they have already explained. And I will explain in terms of the global and also in terms of Malaysian context. So thank you, Centris and also IOHK for inviting me to share a little bit of my knowledge related to climate change, because I did my PhD related to climate change and my master students already graduated, also did on climate change impact on dengue in Pahang. And as you can see in the first slide, on the right side, that one is related to us, what we are experiencing now during the Northeast monsoon season. This one quite latest picture, the last 2 days in Terengganu. And all these pictures are related to climate change. And at the bottom, when we talk about climate change, it's not only related to flood, but it also related to drought. Climate change, usually it will involve extreme events. So flood and also drought. And on the left side, that one actually a picture at the northern part of the Jakarta. As you can see, this is due to sea level rise in the northern Jakarta, and the community that left on the right side, they are actually living below the sea level. So they are very high, they are very vulnerable to flood. And in Jakarta, they're having a problem with sea level rise, and also because of the overconsumption of the underground water. So they are sinking 25 cm annually. So they are very vulnerable to climate change. And the last picture, that one is related to polar bear. Usually when we talk about climate change, involve global warming, increasing in temperature for a long time. So it caused the meltings of the iceberg, melting of the glaciers, so that related to the polar bear picture. Okay, a little bit about my background. Already mentioned by Dr. Saiful, my PhD in community health, specifically in environmental health. And I'm also EIA consultant. EIA means Environmental Impact Assessment. For all the huge project in Malaysia, it will require EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment. And we are registered under the Department of Environment. So we have to monitor the impact of this project towards the environment. And I'm in charge for the health impact assessment. And I'm also a certified person for schedule risk management. And under the EIA, we also have to monitor the effects of flood, but there is no climate change section under the EIA. So we didn't monitor the effects of climate change, but we will monitor the effects of floods due to any development in Malaysia. But not all projects we will monitor for flood, only for certain projects, depends on the DOE requirement. And these are the contents of my sharing. The first one, I will explain a little bit what is climate. Climate is different with weather. And in Malay also, we are using the term iklim. We are not using the term cuaca. So what is climate change? Causes of climate change in global context, the potential impacts of climate change. Then I will explain in the Malaysian context and the adaptation and also mitigating measures of climate change. So what is climate? First, I want to explain a little bit the difference between weather and climate. When we talk about weather, weather is something like currently we are alert about weather forecast because currently we have northeast monsoon seasons. We are aware of weather forecast. We want to know whether today is there any heavy rain, for example, in Kuantan. So weather is just for short term. So weather forecast usually for accurate for 3 days up to 7 days. So weather just for short term, cuaca, and cover for limited area. For example, Kuantan, and they have to predict for other areas and can change rapidly. For example, currently in Kuantan, today quite okay in terms of the weather, but we are not sure what will happen in the afternoon. So the difference between weather and climate, weather is just like a subset of climate. So the larger part is climate, which will involve the changes in the weather for long term, climate variability for long term. So usually when we talk about climate change, we have to use data for at least 20 years, 30 years or more. And even for climate projection, they have to do based on data at least for 50 years. And it will cover for wide area. For example, we will explain about Pahang instead of Kuantan and involve seasonal changes. For example, currently we have northeast monsoon and we have southwest monsoon. So we'll explain changes in terms of the monsoon. And this one I've already covered, usually the effects for long terms. These are the elements that we will explain. When we talk about climate, we will explain about the rainfall. We will explain about the temperature. We'll explain about the humidity, air pressure, wind, and also cloud. But the most important element usually we will describe about the rainfall and also temperature, because humidity is also associated with rainfall. Okay, this one a little bit about the definition of climate change. Basically, climate change, like already mentioned by Prof. Abdul Razak, can be attributed by, but not only anthropogenic activities, man-made, but it can also by natural climate variability. So I will explain after this further why natural. So if anthropogenic, by human, man-made, this one also already mentioned by Prof. Abdul Razak, Zahra al-Fasadu fil Bari wal Bahr, bima kasabat aydin nas, yuzikahum ba'dal ladzi amilu la'allahum yarji'un. So there are a lot of our activities, man-made activities, contributed to the corruption, contributed to the loss of diversity in the environment, and can lead to a lot of environmental impacts, which indirectly can have effect on human health. That one will explain further by Dr. Rohaida. And when we talk about climate change, usually it will have effect on temperature. Usually when we talk about climate change, we will talk about the increasing in temperature. So I will explain after this. Change in wind pattern and also precipitation. For precipitation in Malaysia, we have only rainfall, and not necessarily we will receive abundant of rainfall every year. There might be certain area we receive abundant of rainfall, and it might be in certain location we will have drought. But based on the climate projection in Malaysia, we will receive more rainfall compared to other countries. And the change in a global sense and concerns the Earth as a whole. Okay, these are the causes of climate change, not only anthropogenic, man-made, but also can be cause of the natural activities. For example, volcanic eruptions. So it will release a lot of carbon dioxide, and change in the Earth orbit, and also movement of the crustal plates. This one we cannot control. We cannot do anything. But on the right side, this one related to greenhouse gas emission. And when we talk about climate change, the main cause of climate change is related to GHG, greenhouse gases. So if we can control the amount of greenhouse gases emitted to the atmosphere, so we can reduce a little bit the temperature. So these are the sources for greenhouse emission. For example, from electricity, because currently we are online, we are using Zoom, we have to open our computer, we switch on our aircon, we turn on our light and switch on our fan, all need electricity. So in Malaysia, we have to burn coal. So when we burn coal, for example, by TNB, it will release a lot of carbon dioxide. So it is one of the main culprit for greenhouse gases. And another one can also be from agriculture, from cow, because it will release a lot of methane. And industry also will release a lot of carbon dioxide. Transportation also will release carbon dioxide. Mostly all these activities will release a lot of carbon dioxide. Food waste will release methane, and building, in order to generate electricity, we also will release carbon dioxide. This one, causes of climate change, like I've mentioned, can be natural, can be man-made, and can cause air pollution because high level of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and can lead to global warming. Global warming, for example, for 20 years, for 30 years, then it can lead to climate change. So global warming will happen first, will occur first before climate change occur. This one, I think we have already learned during our secondary school, mentioned about the greenhouse gases, greenhouse effect. Basically, when we have these greenhouse gases, so the solar radiation will be trapped in that lining, so it will cause our Earth to be hotter compared to before. Okay, this one, a global phenomenon. Okay, when we talk about climate change, there are a few reports that we will refer to. All these published under the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. So the latest report is AR6, but this is published in 2022, not yet complete. So, some part of the reports will publish in 2023. So in my presentation, I cover also for AR5. I will cover for AR5 and also AR6. These are data that have been published in AR5. Okay, as you can see, the CO emission increased over the years. the land surface temperature, so in our land, also increased from 1910 until 2010. So this data only up to 2010. And the ocean heat also increased. Okay, this one, ocean heat content also increased. Ocean acidification also increased because of the high abundance of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and it dissolved in the ocean. So it causes acidification of the ocean and can affect all the coral reef, and sea level rise also increased over the years. Okay, this one data for AR6, for report 6 published in 2021. And from this data, okay, when we talk about climate change, there are a lot of models. And when there are a lot of models, they are using a lot of scenarios. So in this model, they are using scenario, for example, SSP 1 until 1.9, and the worst one, SSP 5 until 8.5. So for SSP 1 to 1.9, their scenario, every variable, they have their own scenario. For example, SSP 1 up to 1.9, their estimation in 2050, they want to cut down the emission of CO2. So if they manage to cut down the emission of CO2 by 2050, so the increasing in temperature will be, for example, currently 2020, it's around the increment just around 1.5 compared to the year, if I'm not mistaken, for this one, they are using the reference of 1980 until 1900. So they are using for 50 years. So the increment just for 1.5 degrees Celsius. But if we look at the SSP 5 up to 8.5, this one is the worst. They predict the temperature can increase up to 4 degrees Celsius at the end of the 21st century. So every 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature, it will cause a lot of impacts to the environment. I will show you after this. Okay, this one I think it's easier for us to see the difference. For example, there are a lot of scenarios. In the near term, almost all scenario, they predict the increment just around 1.5 degrees Celsius. In the midterm, the increment can be up to 2 degrees Celsius. And at the end of the 21st century, it can be up to 4 degrees Celsius. But hopefully just 1 degree Celsius, because 4 is too much for the world to bear. Okay, this one also, I took this one, this data from the AR6 published in 2021. This one, if they predict hot temperature extreme over land will occur once in 10 years. So if currently the present temperature increase for 1 degree Celsius, the likelihood for hot temperature extreme over land to occur once in every 10 years, just 2.8 times. But if the temperature increase up to 4 degrees Celsius, the occurrence of hot temperature, extreme temperature occurred once in 10 years, it will occur, the likelihood will increase up to 9 times. Okay, that is how to interpret it. I hope you can get me what I've explained. This one, the occurrence of hot temperature extreme over land that will occur once in every 50 years. So if currently the present, we have already increased the temperature of 1 degree Celsius, the likelihood for that event to occur just 4.8 times. But if the temperature increase up to 4 degrees Celsius, the likelihood of the hot temperature extreme will occur once in every 50 years is 39 times. It's very high likely to occur if the temperature increase up to 4 degrees Celsius. This one, heavy precipitation over land. This one for worldwide. In Malaysia, we experience more heavy rainfall compared to this estimation. For example, currently, if we increase 1 degree Celsius, the likelihood for for heavy precipitation to occur once in 10 years, just 1.3 times. But in Malaysia, we experiencing heavy rainfall almost every year. After this, for Malaysian scenario, I will explain more on flood. And this one related to agriculture and ecological drought. Once in 10 years, if increase up to 4 degrees Celsius, the likelihood will increase up to 4 times to occur, drought. Usually, drought is not as frequent as flood. For flood, we can experience it every year. Usually for drought, maybe once in 10 years or once in 5 years. Okay, this one, global temperature change. If 1 degree Celsius, you can see the effect increasing on the right side. So if the temperature increase, it will affect the food production. That's why people talk about climate change and also food security to make sure that we have enough food. But in Malaysia, I think we are still lacking for research and also strategies for food security. So for food, it will falling crop yields in many areas, particularly developing regions, if the temperature increase. And for water, if the temperature increase, it will cause the melting of the glaciers and indirectly will cause sea level rise. And at the same time, because the temperature increase, it will cause drought. So significant decrease in water availability in certain areas. For ecosystem, this one also I've already mentioned, if the temperature increase, CO2 is too high, too abundant in the atmosphere, it will dissolve in the ocean and cause acidification of the ocean and can affect the coral reef. And climate change also related to extreme weather events, because when we have too high in temperature, evaporation, evapotranspiration will occur. It will absorb so much water, it will retain so much water, and at the same time, it will trigger floods, it will trigger storms. But luckily in Malaysia, we just have only floods. We don't have tornado and all other disasters. But unluckily, other countries, they have a lot of disasters in their countries. So we are lucky staying in Malaysia. And this one, risk of abrupt and major irreversible changes. Mostly, if it's already happening, it is irreversible. For example, coastal erosion. If it's already happened, how to reverse back? Okay, I think I have spent so much in the global context. This one, climate change in Malaysia context. This one, data from UNFCCC, published in 2018. As you can see, this one, they compare data with the observed data in 1970 to the year 2000. And as you can see, for the peninsular Malaysia, we will increase the temperature up to almost 2 degrees Celsius. And as I mentioned, there are a lot of models for climate change. And this one, not AR5. We have another data for AR5. So it can increase up to 3 degrees Celsius. So it depends on model and scenario. For Sabah and Sarawak, can increase up to 1.4 degrees Celsius. For Sarawak, up to 1.6 degrees Celsius. In terms of rainfall, mostly will increase for the whole Malaysia, except for Sabah, will decrease in 2030. In terms of sea level rise, also increase for the whole Malaysia. And the highest part in Sabah, I will show you after this. Okay, this one, sources of greenhouse gases in Malaysia can be from, mostly from energy, because like I mentioned, in order for us to use this electricity, we have to burn coal. So we release a lot of carbon dioxide. From waste, we release methane. From agriculture, we release carbon dioxide. For example, slash and burn method. So they will just burn their agriculture waste, we release carbon dioxide. Industries also will release a lot of carbon dioxide. Okay, this one data using the AR5, different model. So if they are using this model, we can see that the temperature, for example, for RCP 8.5, the temperature can increase up to 3.6 degrees Celsius. Okay, this one just general data from 1991 to 2020. The left side, the temperature, and on the right side for rainfall. And for rainfall, the most abundance area that receive rainfall actually Sarawak. And because we are collaborating with Nahrim for a lot of climate change research, so I know the data, the tabulation for the whole Malaysia. So in Malaysia, the state that will greatly affected by climate change, I mean in terms of temperature, extreme temperature in the future will be Perlis, Kedah, in the northern area of Malaysia, will greatly affected by climate change in terms of temperature. This one data for 2040 to 2059 and 2080 to 2090. And as you can see, in terms of temperature, almost all states indicated increasing in temperature, and the northern area will be greatly affected. And in terms of precipitation, the East Coast areas, similar like what we're having now, including the Selangor, Kuala Lumpur, they are also will be affected. Sabah, Sarawak, surely they will be affected. This one, sea level rise. Okay, as you can see, for example, for Lahad Datu, at the end of the 21st century, it can reach up to 1 meter. So in the future, if you want to buy property, you have to think of this issue too. Although it will take some time because you have to pay to the bank for 30 years. So you have to think of the sea level rise issue too. Okay, like I mentioned, I want to focus a little bit on floods because this is much related to us and we are experiencing it now. Floods events currently become more frequent in Malaysia. For example, in 1989, this one data recorded 1889, then 1926. This one large floods, major floods. But after the year, for example, 2010, we have experienced floods almost every year until now, until today, 2022. This one, flood-prone areas in Malaysia, basically in the coastal areas and those who are living nearby the river. This one, flood in Pahang, we focus in Pahang because me, myself, staying at Kuantan. So in Pahang, we have flood in January 2021, December 2021, and January 2021. Oh, sorry, I repeated it twice. February 2022 and December 2022. So very frequent floods from last year up to this year. Okay, types of floods. I just touched a little bit. There are floods because of the river, flood because of the coastal areas, and also flash floods. Those who are living near the river, they are vulnerable to floods. These are the definition by the UN. So if you are living near the river, for example, less than 500 meters, so you are at high risk. So if you are living within 500 to 1,000 meters, you are at medium risk. More than 1 kilometer, you are at low risk. Causes of flood can also be because of climate change, and this one because of man-made activities, urbanization, deforestation, and can also because of the vegetation and geology, the topography of that area. I put the trees picture over here because actually the trees can absorb so much water. When we do deforestation, when we do land clearing, cut all the trees, so where the water will go, so it will will trigger floods. It will trigger floods if we do land clearing. Okay, this is the data that we can get from the software. You can see which area will be affected by flood in the future. So this one for Pahang 2030. So mostly in the coastal areas and those who are living near the river. Okay. Pahang in 2060. And this one, Malaysia for 2100. I cannot go details because it will exceed times. Okay, this one sea level rise in Malaysia is already happening. If you Google, there are a lot of village already submerged underwater. For example, in Terengganu, in Muar. So this area are actually vulnerable. Batu Pahat, Melaka, Penang, Miri, Klang, Selangor, Pekan, vulnerable to sea level rise. And I know some of the lecturers, they also brought an asset at the Somerset Rompin in 2010, but currently the area already submerged underwater. This one, 600 houses already submerged underwater because of the sea level rise. Okay, what we can do, as already explained a little bit by Prof. Abdul Razak, the mitigation and also adaptation. So for mitigation, basically what we can do to release the greenhouse gases. For example, for us, for maybe you can ride a bicycle. Maybe we cannot do all, but we can't left all. Maybe you can do certain part that you can do, so you can practice that part. For example, waste management. Currently, I'm doing food compost at my home, so at least I will throw limited waste to the landfill, so less methane. So waste reduction, energy efficient building. So if you are not staying in that room, better switch off the aircon, turn off the light. Okay, use the low carbon transportation or hybrid car. In terms of adaptation, for example, flood protection, I will show you example after this. Choose local food, water conservation, public engagement, and actually for example, this knowledge sharing is also part of the adaptation. So at least we give awareness to the community about the climate change issue. And currently we have flood, at least you are aware. So if you are living near the river or near the coastal area, so at least you can prepare. These are the example of personal choice to reduce your contribution to climate change. Like mentioned by Prof. Abdul Razak, behavioral change. This one for low impact, I just go for the high impact. For example, use the hybrid car. This one related to flight. Flight also will release a lot of carbon dioxide. And from the research, it's mentioned that from the aviation industry, it increased the temperature for 0.1 degrees Celsius. But sometimes it's hard to avoid. And maybe if you want to travel nearby your house, you can ride a bicycle. And this one, also among the adaptation strategies, in the past few years, in the last few years, I bring the students to go to Ulu Temeling, and I was shocked actually during that time because the community there, they put the barrel at the bottom of their houses. So the rural community, they have already think of the adaptation strategies for flood. And currently there are a lot of the floating houses, not only at Ulu Temeling, they have already replicated to other areas. You can see it at Temelo and other areas. And this one also one of the adaptation strategies for flood. I also saw they did for their house at Terengganu and also Kelantan. They used this kind of barrier and actually can prevent the flood from entering their house. This one also one of the adaptation strategies. This one, if I'm mistaken, at Kelantan. So the community there, they put something like a barrier, so it protects their house from flood. So we have to be creative. Another the adaptation strategies, this one flood safety tips. At least you have already aware, currently we have northeast monsoon. So if you are living near the river or near the coastal areas, you have to be prepared. And make sure we are alert and always alert to the MMD announcement, Malaysian Meteorological Department announcement, weather forecast. Okay, before I end my sharing, the choice we make will create different outcomes. So we cannot do all, like I've mentioned, but please don't left all. Maybe we can contribute, although a little bit, like I mentioned, I'm doing compost at home. So I will throw limited waste to the landfill. Okay, there's no planet B. So this is we need collaborative actions, not only me, but all of us. So we have to do our part to protect our world. Okay, that's all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nur Atikah. So I think the message is clear. We don't have any other planet to stay, right, Dr. Nur Atikah? This is the only planet that we can stay, and it's not surprising, but quite sad to know that the temperature is increasing in trend, and there's a lot of areas in our country, in Malaysia, especially in Peninsula, is going to be underwater sea level sooner or later, and it's already happening, as I mentioned just now, in Rompin and as well in Kuantan. So I think it's a great time for us to discuss about this issue and hope that there are clear management plan that we as public as well as academicians can actually involve to help the situation. I know it cannot be stopped, but at least we can be prepared and can help our community to face these challenges. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Rohaida Ismail. She will actually cover regarding the topics about the impact of this climate change to the health status of the population as well as to the public, and also would like to know what would be the management strategies from the Ministry of Health in general. I would like to invite Dr. Rohaida Ismail. She is currently actually the head of climate change unit at the Environmental Health Research Center, Institute for Medical Research, IMR. The session is yours, Dr. Rohaida. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saiful. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. But before I proceed with my presentation, can Dr. Atikah stop her slide, please? Stop the slide sharing.
Okay, but wait for a while. I thought I have already stopped.
No, I cannot start the screen now.
I think I've already stopped sharing.
But we still see your slide, Dr. Nur Atikah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it possible? Yeah.
Okay, wait for a while.
Okay, I think I can share now. Can you see my slide?
Not yet, Dr. Rohaida.
But now I'm on sharing mode.
Yes, I think I can see your. Is it you're sharing the poster?
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Okay. Thank you again, Dr. Saiful, for your kind introduction. And again, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And it is my pleasure today to be here in this webinar that I made 2022 with the academic experts from the UIA and also our future generation for the next generation. To proceed with the works on environmental health, climate change, and health. So today I will present it. I will be presented the strategies of managing climate change, the perspective from the MOH. Yeah, basically, we at the Environmental Health Research Center, we are working on the policy, the consultation, and also we are working on research related to environmental health, and especially in my unit on the climate change. And currently, we are in the final works on developing the national communication, the Malaysia reports to the UNFCCC or United Nations Framework of Climate Change Convention. So this is my outline of my presentation, basically on the health impacts on climate change. So as we listen to Dr. Atikah just now, globally and regionally and nationally, there's risk of global warming. And if we can look at the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, the assessment report 6, we can see that with the SSP or the shared socioeconomic pathway, if we do nothing, then the shared the SSP will be increased to SSP 5 to 8.5, and if we do take action now, possibly we can mitigate climate change for the next 50 years, 100 years, so that we can see the blue line here is the RCP around RCP 1 to 1.9 with less than 2.5. So the impact to human in terms of the extreme weathers, the ecosystems, the distribution of impacts, including health, would be, if you can look at the right side graph, it showed that if we do something and in the future, the impact would be either moderate and it could be less than moderate. But if we do not do something today, then the RCP would be above 8.5, and that the risk to humans, especially, and the ecosystem as well, are very high. And the below graph here is actually the projection. This 1980 to 200 is the observation temperature for coastal regions in Peninsula Malaysia. And we can see in different kind of models. This is the models by that was observed by Nahrim, as mentioned by Dr. Atika just now. So there would be an increase of temperature in the next 50 years and 100 years. So why it is important to know the science of climate change? Because it impacted us, the human. So we can see that in the past few years, especially in 2019, where the WHO had initiated or had produced the 10 threats to global health in 2019. It started the first with air pollution and climate change. And in fact, air pollution is indirectly related to climate change. And the next 2020, the challenges, the most urgent health challenges to be tackled in 2020. At the same time, there was emergence of COVID-19. So at that time, 2020, climate change still being considered as the first or the top one of the threats to human health. However, since the pandemic COVID-19 in 2020 and the pandemic have worsened, the WHO had listed the 10 global health issues, which very much related to COVID-19. But then there's other issues that we should add in solidarity, especially in COVID-19 and climate change. And for the WHO in 2022, the theme for World Health Day 2022 is on our planet, our health. It's about the planetary health, how people are being affected worldwide due to environmental health issues. These include the climate crisis, and climate crisis has been highlighted as the important one. The climate crisis is also health crisis, and this has been identified or has been focused by the United Nations through the UNFCCC since 2018. And the second one on the climate change and health. There's a lot of scientific evidence, the basic science on the climate change and the impacts of humans have been pointed on the direct effect or indirect effect. However, in Malaysia, there's certain diseases that we are focusing, which are very much related to climate change. And from the IPCC or Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, they have been observed the impacts of climate change on human health. And I have highlighted the ASEA. For the ASEA, especially on the middle one, on the impact of health and well-being, the impacts from infectious diseases, the heat, malnutrition, mental health, and displacements. It is attributed to humans with very high confidence, or from medium, some from medium to very high confidence. And this is, I would like to share, this is an interactive infographic by Professor Jeremy Hess. He is one of the authors for climate change and health in the IPCC. So the interactive infographic was very much informative, where we had Prof. Jeremy and his team had underlined, we have to recognize and frame the problem with interdisciplinary lens. We have to work together. The Ministry of Health have to work together with other agencies, other stakeholders, the universities, and also the stakeholders, including public. For example, the altered in the vector ranges that cause an increase of of infectious diseases. And the health sector emission strategies, there's two strategies for climate change. When we want to address the climate change, is either the adaptation or mitigation. What is the difference between adaptation and mitigation? The adaptation meaning that the climate change have already occurred, and the process is not reversible. So we have to adapt in terms of human health impact towards climate change. Another one is mitigation. Mitigation is related to how we control the carbon emission. So actually the health sector globally have responsible or contributed over 4% of global emission. In Malaysia, the major contributor to carbon emission is actually the energy sector, the transportation, and the land use and forestry. Those are the major sectors. But we in health sector should start now to act now to reduce our emission as well, and then to increase funding for climate and health. How we are going to integrate the works that we have done, the surveillance, the prevention and control of the diseases, decision support analytics. This is important. We in IM are also doing some modeling and prediction, especially on heat wave and air pollution. But we also working together with the university, for example, the works by Dr. Atika on food and waterborne diseases that do the modeling and prediction. And these works on the modeling, the modeling and prediction will help in support or improve our early warning systems. And that the enhanced use of environmental informations, how we need to get the data, the science data from the other sectors, for example, the meteorological department, Department of Environment, and also usually the projection or modeling for climate change is being reported by the NAHRIM, or National Hydrological Research Institute of Malaysia. And lastly is building the human capacity in climate change and health. So how we are going to do the awareness to increase the works on climate change, to strengthen current program, to have our own experts on data management that will help in the surveillance system, and will lead the climate change and health works in our country. So climate change sensitive health outcomes. Usually in the past few years, the UNFCCC are using the climate change sensitive disease, but there's other apart from disease, there's other health outcomes that should be considered as well as on the public health vulnerability. So basically, the climate change would involve the first, increased temperature, second, increased precipitation, and third, sea level rise. These are the three science components of climate change, and how these are being mediated by our ecosystems. Our ecosystem, how we are control our land use. We do the development project, and the ecosystems are actually being affected, and this will further affect the vector in our environments, the air quality, and basically the direct effects would be from the extreme weather events, the floods and storms, heat, hot weather or heat wave, and UV radiation. And basically, I will focus on infectious diseases rather than other health outcomes. If you look into vector-borne diseases, this is the United Nations report in 2018, which was adapted from the WHO. I have highlighted the Asia region, which is our region. And we can see that in the next few years, 2030 and 2050, malaria is actually very much affected by climate change. If we do not do something now, if we do not contain our carbon emission, if we do not reduce our anthropogenic activities that leading to that, and also if we do nothing, then these diagrams is actually followed the moderate impact of climate change. So the impact to vector-borne diseases is actually more towards malaria as compared to dengue, because there could be other factors. There's some uncertainties in the disease, for example, the human interaction, the population mobility, the human behavior that could affect the outcomes of vector-borne diseases. This is about malaria. In the Western Pacific region, over the past 20 years, we can see the reduction in the malaria incidence and death rate from higher to 1.9 in 2021 of malaria incidence, and the death rate 0.3. And we can see in 2020, Malaysia, the last one in the graph, showed that we have achieved 0 cases of malaria. This is actually indicating the indigenous malaria, the infection from human to human. And we can see that out of 10 countries, Malaysia is among the 6 countries that have achieved the reduction of case incidence by more than 40% in 2020 as compared to previous 5 years. You can see the Malaysia is actually the blue one, and by 2018 we actually have achieved 0 indigenous malaria cases. However, if you look at the below graph, human indigenous malaria, we have achieved the 0 indigenous human malaria by 2018, and since then we have achieved in 2020 we are achieving the 4 years of 0 indigenous human malaria, but then we are having threats from zoonotic malaria, meaning that from the animals to human, usually from the monkey to human. However, the cases for the zoonotic malaria or Plasmodium nausea is actually very much related to migration. We get the zoonotic malaria from the foreign workers who are coming to Malaysia, and also from our workers who are working outside overseas, and then they are coming back and bringing back the Plasmodium nausea or zoonotic malaria. And actually, from the IPCC, it said that even though malaria is projected to be higher in the next 50 years, however, with good public health intervention, we can reduce the cases, and this has been seen in the case of Malaysia. We have, using our own funding, very high funding in our malaria prevention and control activities as compared to other countries in Western Pacific regions. And the malaria program adaptation strategies was coming after the National Strategic Malaria Elimination Plan, as we ended the previous plan in 2021, and we are focusing on the interaction with the various stakeholders, especially the communities, to participate in the malaria program, and the universal health coverage that will determine whether they got they are getting early diagnosis, early treatment, and a good vector control, and development of strategies and surveillance, either for malaria cases, the human, and also the entomological surveillance using the GIS and remote sensing technology. And for dengue, we know that Malaysia is the areas at risk for dengue, and it can be seen during 2015 to 2016 and 2019, the increased number of cases it was very much related to higher temperature, because during 2015, 2016 and 2019, there were El Nino phenomenon, which bringing the hot temperature from the sea to land, and with higher temperature, mosquito biting habit is changing. Their breeding pattern also changing, and the virus transmission would be accelerated. Replication of the viruses in Aedes. So what have we done? The dengue virus serology surveillance program. In 2014, the MOH had made mandatory that all registered dengue cases have to have a confirmatory serological testing together with sentinel surveillance of circulating dengue serotype at the National Public Health Lab and also in IMR. And the integrated vector management was improved in terms of source reduction, community mobilization, and also vector control. And in 2022, the National Strategic Plan for Dengue Prevention and Control was developed with 3 strategies and also 2 supporting elements to enhance the current surveillance program and then prevention and control program. And next, I will talk about food and waterborne diseases. The UN report in 2018, Africa, especially at the Sub-Sahara, and also Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, are the 2 regions that will be more affected on food and waterborne diseases. This is the estimated death, the additional death due to diarrheal diseases in children less than 15 years. So we can see that Asia in 2030, if we we do something with climate change, the effects will be more as compared to without climate change. And this is the Malaysia figure for food waterborne incidence rate from 2000 to 2021. We can see that from the programs, it's actually the number of cases are coming down, but for the food waterborne diseases, the incidence is quite high, but coming down in 2021. It could be related to reduced exposure, reduced mobility due to COVID-19. And then leptospirosis. Leptospirosis is actually the communicable disease, but the transmission from the vector is actually very much related to extreme weather events. The flood. Usually with the increased rainfall, the population of the vectors, especially the rats or mice, would increase in size, and then there will be increased exposure from the vector environment and human. And this lead to increased cases of leptospirosis cases. It can be seen by our previous study on leptospirosis post-flood, which is after the large flood 2014. This number of cases is actually from Kelantan. We can obviously see the middle one is actually the flood event in December 2014 to January 2015, and 3 months after that, immediately after that, actually, the cases of leptospirosis increased and reduced around 3 months after that. And the study we have did mapping, the first with the river and second with the dumping site or temporary dumping site, and we can see that the location is very much of the cases is very much related to the river flooding and also dumping area. So what have Ministry of Health planned in managing food waterborne and leptospirosis? We have, for example, currently we have experienced flood in East Coast of Peninsular Malaysia, especially. We do have specific plan for managing flood, especially for health management, by improving water sanitation and hygiene and better surveillance system. And we do have education, and our medical teams and health team will have visits to the relief center to monitor the health among the victims, and also to ensure the water sanitation and hygiene are being properly practiced by the victims. And we have special plans on food waterborne, especially on the strengthening the early warning systems. And Malaysia also have is actually part of the WHO Global Salmonella Survey Network, which to improve the capacity and quality of salmonella isolation, and also IMR is very much involved in this project. And leptospirosis. Previously, it is not a notifiable disease until 2011. It comes under the prevention and control of infectious diseases at part of the at 342. So the prevention and control program basically to enhance the surveillance, to ensure that all the cases are being notified, and then to collaborate with other agencies and stakeholders, and to do the risk reduction research and development. And the next, this is actually quite, it is not, it is direct effect of heat, but initially, it was not being reported or not being monitored because previously we don't have very severe episodes of climate change until around 2015, 2016, where we have a very strong El Nino phenomenon. And then in 2018, 2019, we have another episode of strong El Nino. So this is the hospital admission under the ICD-10 of health, T67 effects of heat and light. And we can see during the hot weather events or heat wave episodes, there's increase of reported cases and also increased hospital admissions for heat-related illnesses. So in 2016, the clinical management of heat wave or heat-related illnesses was introduced to ensure that the medical practitioner have a good knowledge to diagnose heat-related illnesses, because we know that heat-related illnesses is not a simply heat stroke, but it comes with other symptoms such as heat rashes, heat syncope, heat what else? Heat syncope, heat rashes. That's all. Sorry. And then and then in 2021, the Ministry of Health has updated our health action on climate change, specifically on heat wave. We outline the health actions in all phases of heat wave by monitoring heat related illnesses. We come up with promotional and educational materials, for example, the poster here in few languages. And then we increase the health promotion and also to identify the vulnerable groups, especially the age-related elderly, children's, and then the special groups such as pregnant women and people with comorbidities. So public health vulnerability, as we look at, this is the World Risk Index for it is not for public health vulnerability, but basically on the socioeconomic, human, and everything. We can see that Malaysia is over here. Based on the World Risk Index, is actually we have low level of vulnerability, and there's another model or another assessment for vulnerability, such as INFORM, and this part we also around the low level of vulnerability. So for the vulnerability of public health, usually we are looking into the vulnerability factors, the socio-demographic, as I mentioned before, with age, gender, and certain groups, the geographical factors such as the remote communities, the island, the urban, and the biological factors such as the comorbids, socio-political and socio-economic factors as well. And exposure pathway, we are looking into the what kind of hazards that the vulnerable groups are facing, and I actually would like to highlight it about health systems capacity and resilience. In addressing public health vulnerability, there's coherence between international agreements. For example, the Sendai framework, the Sustainable Development Goals, which climate change actions is actually comes under the Goal 3. Sorry, Goal 3 is health actually, sorry, under the Goal 13 on the climate change and related to Goal 3 on health. And there's interrelation between what are being monitored and observed by the Sendai frameworks, SDG, and also the Paris Agreement for climate change. And the WHO also have highlighted on the climate resilient health systems. And this is actually the vulnerability and adaptation for climate change for public health is being put into our health research priority for 12th Malaysian plan. The books, you can search the book and you can download the PDF version online. Just type the title. So what is the climate resilience healthcare systems? Especially after the large flood in 2014, the Ministry of Health has embarked into the development projects of the healthcare facilities that was and being affected by flood. For example, the flood mitigation gate, relocation of healthcare facilities with different designs. For example, this is clinic pergigian, dental clinic, which is the parts of health clinics, part of Rantau Panjang health clinics in Kelantan. And these clinics almost every year was being affected by flood. So you can see this is the water level during 2014. This is the early parts. Is actually the water level has came out higher than this. So in 2022, the Ministry of Health has managed to relocate this clinic to a new area about 5 kilometers from the previous area, and the design is actually for type 3 health clinic designs for large clinics. And for the smaller clinics, for example, this is another one in Kelantan, the community clinic atau clinic desa, the previously aged and vulnerable, and also this clinic also affected by flood. And the MOH has rebuilt a new clinic in 2022 with type 7 designs where they are located in non-flood prone area and rebuilt better. And the MOH also looking into improving the supply, the water supply, the food, and also the hospital supply to ensure the resiliency of our healthcare facilities. And the MOH also has engaged with other ministry, the Ministry of Environment and Water, or KASAW. Currently, they have changed the name into NRECC, National Resources, Environment and Climate Change Ministry. And with MGTC, as part of the National Environmental Health Action Plan, we do communication, education and public awareness, or SEPA, through online, which was recorded, and we have the live version for this webinar, which being focused mainly on climate change and health, the outcomes of extreme weather events to health. So this is the end of my slides. So we know that the impact of climate change on human health, that's more than what I have discussed before. That's we need also to focus on other effects such as the mental health, the migration, displacements of our community and others. So climate change crisis, it will continue to affect us, the human, and our response should be outlined in various ways. For example, collaboration with other sectors, especially public, the community, engagement with all stakeholders, and enhanced capacity building and training. So lastly, climate at now, yes, say yes to this. So I would like to thank the organizer. And if any one of you would like to have further questions or like to have further collaboration with IMR, Institute for Medical Research, you can contact me through this email. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rohaida from IMR, for that, I would say, holistic presentation on the impact of this climate change to the health of our public, as well as actually it's also involved our healthcare system. So basically, we might feel that it's related with socio-demographic changes, physical impact, but actually it's also involved a lot of domains in our healthcare services, even the facility. So thank you very much, Dr. Rohaida, for that. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions after this, and we'll discuss that later in Q&A session and forum session. Thank you, Dr. Rohaida. I would like to invite Dr. Ramzi Bandekar to discuss us further regarding the perspective of Islam of this issue of climate change. What will be the root, what will be the causes, and what will be the management solution that can be provided from Islam perspective? I invite Dr. Ramzi to present your discussion. Thank you very much, Dr. Ramzi.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad Shamsun. First of all, thank you for inviting me to share my ideas concerning the climate change. First of all, Dr. Abdul Razak, our Professor Abdul Razak, Dr. Muhammad Shayfood, the director of this program, professors, doctors, my colleagues, friends, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like also to thank the speakers, Dr. Noor and Dr. Rohaida, for informative presentations. And therefore, my presentation for this speech is just to highlight some thoughts and ideas that can be developed in the future, inshallah, concerning the view or Islamic perspective of climate change. So the questions that I'm going and inshallah try to answer it in this presentation. The first one is, what are the causes or the causes of climate change from an Islam? And finally, we will try to find the next step to work forward, inshallah, the climate change. Before we talk about Islamic management or solutions, we need to look at the root of the problem. What's the root of the problem from an Islamic perspective? So in doing so, I have this plan. The first thing is the introduction and the roots of climate change in Islam, management of the issues from an Islamic perspective, and then and then we conclude our presentation, inshallah. So I will focus on this in this introduction. Islam and climate change. I can say that, unfortunately, in the Muslim world, most of the time when we face issues, the only discussion that we have is this a punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is this a test? And they stop there. So we don't benefit from issues and move on forward to tackle the problems. And the climate change is one of it. What happened here and there, the disasters and the diseases that previous doctors were talking about it. So we stop there. Is it a punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is it a test? The climate change or a COVID or anything, unfortunately, this is the discussions that we have it in the Muslim world nowadays. Of course, thinking about this is a must in Islam. Means we need to understand the meaning of ibtila and the meaning of iqab from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but how we can benefit from the events and how we can use it in order to correct ourselves as individuals and as communities and societies. Concerning this topic, I have 5 points. So the first thing is to accept what happened to us at the first place. So Dr. Noor was talking about the adaptation. Okay, the adaptation strategies. The adaptation strategies based also at the first place on the acceptance of the issue itself. We must accept it, because anything happened to us is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the first thing. And the second thing, which is the main important thing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran said, خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. What does it mean? Means our life is a continuous problems. When we finish with one problem, we go to fix another one. When we finish the second one, we go to finish the third one, and so on and so forth. It's a cycle. So our life is a cycle of problems. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran didn't promise us that we are going to live a life without issues, without the problems, whether individually or collectively. We must understand this. And the first step, and I find that this is the main important thing in solving our problems, is to accept it first. I think most of you here are medical doctors, and they know very well what I am talking about, specifically when you deal with the patients. And most of the time, the problem is not with the treatment that you provided, not with the things that you describe it as a medical doctor, but most of the time, the problem is that the patient doesn't accept his or her situation. And therefore, it makes it difficult for you to treat them or even to describe things to the patients. So this is the first thing. The second thing, it does not mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates us. And this is important. When we have issues in our life, it doesn't mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates us. Okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً. Means the bad things like climate change or COVID-19, it's not always because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates us, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can also test us with the good things in our life. When we have the money, when we be healthy, when we don't have issues in our life itself is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are we going to do with all of this? With the risk that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to us. And the third point, it could be a rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the Dr. Ruhaida was talking about, and as Dr. Noor were talking about different issues and the predictions for the future. So the climate change became an indicator for us as a human being, is to correct ourselves from now in order to escape or to tackle the issues, and also to reduce this predictions, this negative predictions that we have it for the future, 2080, 2100, and so on and so forth. So it's like a measure to correct ourselves for the future. And from this sense is a rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We just imagine if the things that's happened by sudden, I mean the what we call it, the extreme events happen suddenly in our lives. So how we can, so how we can proceed with that? But the climate change and the ways of measuring climate change itself is a rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to correct ourselves for the future. And then the fourth point, to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to remember that this is the amana from Allah, means the nature and the universe, and this earth is amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are we going to do with that? And finally, the existence of ma'siyah, bad deeds, and disbelieving in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, also something that we need to avoid it in our life, because this is for true. As we are Muslims, we also believe that sometimes because of our ma'siyah and disbelieving and deviating from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us in the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ in the Sunnah, sometimes may cause some issues like that in our life. Okay, so there are so many concepts when we talk about climate change. There are so many concepts out there, like climate change, that the worldview, how we see the life around us, and also economy, for example, politics, and policies, cooperation, how the countries are cooperating concerning this issue, for example. So there are so many concepts that we need to make a relation and the link between this concept in order to understand our position as a Muslim and as a human being. So the root of the issue, I am going to talk about the human nature. As our Prof. Abdul Razzaq was talking about the human behavior, and the root of a human behavior is a human nature, how we see the human nature in our life. So the human nature has a negative impact and also positive impact on climate change. I'm not going to cover the positive impact of human nature, actually, because when we talk about the positive impact, like technologies, recycle, and so many things that some humans are developing in order to tackle the issue of climate change. But I'm going to focus on the negative impact of human nature. The way how we understand human nature can determine our actions, can determine our behavior toward issues like climate change at the first place. So approaches to human nature, moralities and ethics, I divide it into three major approaches. So the first one is pessimistic. The second one is optimistic. And the last one is neutral. Okay, when we talk about pessimistic human nature and the theories from different aspects like politics, economy, philosophy, psychology, and so on and so forth, when they talk about human nature negatively, the main problem is they are not providing solutions. And rather than that, they are asking us to fulfill this desire. Like, for example, when you say that the human nature is bad, egoism, selfishness, self-interest motivated by competition and fighting others because of the scarcity. We do have this scarcity and we need to become rich. We need to make money. We need to look for ourselves and so on and so forth. But in the end, like the realism theory, for example, they don't provide solutions in order to fix this human nature. Rather than that, they are asking us to fulfill this desire. Okay, you want to become rich? Go for it. If you are going to build more factories, if you are going to go for deforestation, for example, if you are going to harm the others, this is not the main objective. The main objective is to become rich. Okay, so this is the first approach. The second one is the mixture of evil and goodness when we talk about optimistic, but there is this ability to evolve. Even the second part, which is optimistic approach, they said that the human nature is a mix of evil and good, but there is a huge probability that this human being can be what? Can be good. Again, here the problem that we can see with this approach when we talk about optimistic is that they are saying that a human being can be good, but which type of goodness are we talking about here? Because sometimes it's a question of right and wrong. Maybe what's wrong for you can be right for me, actually. Therefore, there is no way to measure this according to this approach. More than that, we will see the results of all these approaches on us, on a human being toward climate change, for example. And finally, the role of the environment. When we talk about a neutral approach, they said it's up to environment to achieve and develop a human being, actually. It's the role of science is what we call it the mechanistic view, as Dr. Abbas talk about it, is a mechanistic view of life, actually. It's depend on the environment outside, okay? Means we cannot develop ourselves. I am not the reason for what I am today. Dr. Ramzi, for example, I am not the reason for what I am today. It's not my education, it's not this and that, it's because of the environment outside, okay? It's very dependent to environment that we have it outside. What we can see here is the total absence of holistic understanding of the human nature. And that's what caused, or what are we going to discuss it now, is the description of a human nature. These three approaches leads to this problems that we have it nowadays when we say that the first one, too much freedom. Too much freedom means you are free to do whatever you want. Your freedom ends when the other's freedom start. That's all, okay? And this is itself is problematic. When we let people do whatever they want in harming the environment, harming the forest, for example, trying to achieve their goals with any means, because the real matter is to be free from anything, from any rules, from any decisions, from any regulations that may regulate your activities, for example, to not harm the climate change. So no one has this capacity to stop you in to stop you to do what you are doing right now. The second thing is there is no accountability. If you became rich, it's up to you, and therefore people are not, or even governments are not going to see the harm that you cause it in order to become rich economically, and therefore this is another outcome of our understanding of a human nature. The third thing is the absence of moralities, is the total absence of moralities. Sometimes when we deal with these issues, in the end of the day, we are going to see if it may harm us directly or not. Is the self-interest, okay? And the interest became morality itself. What does it mean, the interest became morality itself? It's like, if I became rich, this is my morality. This is my personal morality. It's not to solve problems like climate change. It's not to deal with the issues of the others. It's not to see what the others are going to suffer if I am doing what I am doing in individual or personal matter. And to just show and give an example of this double standard of moralities, or how we understand it, I give the example of the soldiers, because this one is very clear. You see, when you see in YouTube these videos about soldiers from the United States coming home to the United States, and they met with their families, crying, and this music and so on and so forth, and they told them as you are heroes, our heroes, and so on and so forth. So this is their morality. Okay, at the same time, we need to understand that those are the same soldiers who are killing others, who are using weapons, who are using weapons of mass destruction in other countries, like in Iraq and in other cities, that they became worse in terms of life and in terms of extreme events that happened there. So we see that this how we understand moralities, and that's how we understand ethics when we describe a human nature in a certain way, and this is something dangerous. And also materialism. Materialism means the ends that justify the means. Okay, if my country is going to become developed, therefore we don't care about the means. Okay, because the ends is to become what? Is to become developed. Therefore, the means that we are using it, even we are harming our climate, even we are adding problems to the climate change. So it's not that matter. The real matter is the end itself. It's to become what? It's to become a developed country. And this idea, the idea of Machiavelli, is the source of what we call it the realism theories that we have it nowadays. And finally, and most importantly, people suffer because they mean nothing to the powerful people. And this is true. And we can see it very clearly that the cause of climate change is mostly coming from the rich countries, actually. But who is suffering? The developing countries, because of the situation in, because of the situation, the events, and so on and so forth happen in developing countries. But the real cause happened from the rich countries in the north, actually. So move on with this. We can see that, for example, top CO2 emitting countries since the Industrial Revolution in UK in 18th century. So we can see that most of the countries are developed countries. You see, so the problems happen there, but they do have this capacity. When Dr. Ruhaida was talking about public, for example, the public health, the difference between developing countries and developed countries, why sometimes we cannot see the climate change clearly in developed countries, it's because the capacities that they have. It's because the capacities to deal with the issues, it's because the covering system, healthcare system, for example, and so on and so forth. Therefore, we cannot see it clearly sometimes. And some people may say that why they are living a good life while we are suffering, therefore we are the problem, not them. But in reality, it's because the difference of capacities and of course the history and the experience that they have concerning some issues. The nations with the worst air pollution in the world, and what we are talking here is that the people are suffering because of the powerful, because of the others. When we see the list of the countries here, for example, I forgot to put China also, the Asia Pacific. Why Asia Pacific exactly became a region of extreme events and disasters and diseases and so on and so forth? Because we need to remember that 31 trillion USD, 31 trillion USD of international production are situated and are situated here in Asia Pacific. Means the productions that we have it in the world, more than 50% concentrated here in Asia Pacific. Therefore, Asia Pacific is suffering more, and not the Western world actually. So, what's human nature from an Islamic perspective? How Islam see the what we call it, see the human nature? The first thing, among all creation in the heaven and the earth, only man be called as the best creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. So the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us this life and make us as the honored creation in this earth by giving us aql, creating us in good health with the fitra, which is the second thing that we talk about it. Man is born with the fitra, and the meaning of fitra, man comes to this world without any stain or sin. The Holy Quran also explained that naturally man has been born as a believer in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty. And the second thing with the fitra, also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us from the body and what we call it, the ruh. And we must take care with this ruh actually. We cannot only focus on the body and these kind of issues without correcting ourselves, without correcting the ruh, which is the human nature. And by correcting the ruh means we are correcting the human behavior. We are correcting our actions toward nature and toward our environment actually. And the third point, a human being has been further honored in his stature and position when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made all things created in the heaven and earth to be of service to him. So, and this is what we call it, the taskhir from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have this taskhir, means giving us this ni'am that we have it in earth, and we must use it in a good manner actually, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to see what are we going to do with this ni'mah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored us with. And the fourth thing is the amana, and this is the meaning of amana. Amana means the sum total of all the decrees, commands, amr, and prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala present in the Sharia. Anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to avoid it, anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to do it, we must do it, because following the Creator, following what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, of course, we are going to protect ourselves and protect the others. Automatically, it's a mechanism. It's like the maqasidu sharia. Why maqasidu sharia is that? It's a mechanism to protect the life of people themselves. Okay, is to protect us. The maqasid is to protect as a mechanism to protect a human being actually. Therefore, following Islam and following the maqasid and the sharia is itself a mechanism to protect ourselves from such as events like climate change, for example. And finally, and the fifth point concerning the human nature from an Islamic perspective, human being will fall from the honored position given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he transgresses the limits set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we deviated from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to do, therefore we cannot keep the same position as honored creation actually. Okay, because why? Because achieving the honor or this grace in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a choice left to man to decide. So we decide whether to be good or whether to be bad. Is a choice actually. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. And here we understand the difference between a human, Islamic understanding of a human being and other perspective that I just explained it to you. Why? Because from an Islamic perspective is a choice. and therefore we can correct ourselves, we can be good. It's not like other theories that we explain it. When you are bad, you are bad. When you are selfish, you are selfish. Just act and just behave based on that, based on your nature, as they said. Okay, so obstacles to solve the problem of climate change. I think there are three major obstacles in order to solving this problem. The first thing, people may prioritize short-term gain or their own self-interest over long-term sustainability, as Dr. Noor was talking about what will happen in the future, like in 2080 and 2100, for example. Some people just, they don't care about this period of time. They are more busy with what we call it a short period gain rather than a long period gain, actually. The second thing, people might be resistant to making changes to their lifestyle, or maybe skeptical of the scientific evidences, like what happened during COVID-19. Some people even didn't accept that and didn't believe on that, actually. And this is also, again, it's something problematic that we need to talk about it and fix it and highlight it in the future, actually. Because I believe, personally, most of the time, the problem is not with the strategies. The problem is with the obstacles. You see, it's like I always give my students this example. I like when the Imam, for example, talk about the benefit of getting married, and the marriage is good in Islam and so on and so forth. But I said, all of us, we know this, but the real matter is the obstacles to getting married. That's what we need to tackle, and that's what we need to talk about it all the time. The same thing, when we talk, for example, about the climate change, we need also to find solutions to this kind of obstacles that we have it in our communities and in our societies. Tackling the problem of climate change requires both recognizing and dealing with this complicated human factors, not only one. We have too many, and therefore we must focus on all of it in order to come out with a comprehensive understanding of what we have. General assumptions, I will not take much time talking about general assumptions, but I would like to highlight that Muslims view climate change as a moral and ethical issue at the first place. In Islam, the natural world is seen as a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we do have evidences, means from the Quran and the Sunnah talking about that. Islam also emphasizes the concept of Tawheed. Why? Because if we focus on the concept of Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are going to respect and take care of God's creation, the natural world. We are going to care about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us as an amana to us, and what are we going to do with that, because we know that everything is beyond to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are accountable in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, we will take care of our climate and the environment, and so on and so forth. And the last thing, of course, Islam also asks us to be responsible for the natural resources and any resources that we have. And it's not for nothing that we Muslims in Kitabul Fiqh, starting from Kitabul Fiqh, subhanallah, the first thing that we studied is at Tahara. And the first thing that we studied in Tahara is Aqsamul Miyah, the division of water. This is the good water, this is Ma'un Tahur, this is Ma'un Tahir, and this is this water cannot be used for our Tahara. And therefore, subhanallah, from the beginning, Islam is guiding us to use resources sustainably. This is the first thing. And the second thing is to understand the importance of keeping things clean. Okay, and the Prophet ﷺ said, وَجُعِلَتْ لِيَ الْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا, means I can pray everywhere, because the earth is a masjid. All of it is a masjid. And therefore, we Muslims, we are going to think that every and each place in this earth must be my mosque, must be my masjid, my musalla, means I can pray there, means I need to keep it clean. So you see, so from the beginning of Kitab al-Tahara, we already, Islam tackled this kind of issues and behavior of a human being in order to guide them to protect themselves and to protect the environment and to protect the earth in this manner, because it has a strong relation with the Tawheed, it has a strong relation with the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I just want to highlight that there was the Islamic Declaration on Global Climate Change in 2015, when they talk about natural resources and so many things, and we must relay this topic with the moralities and with ethics and so on and so forth. Okay, so for the solutions also, I would like to share these three solutions concerning what we call it concerning the individual level, because there are two levels. I would like to talk about individual level in rather and the main elements in tackling the climate change individually and collectively. The first one, and the first thing that I would like to talk about it is the preparing individuals. Is the same strategies that Dr. Noor and Dr. Ruhaida were talking about, but how are you going to prepare the individuals? Is providing a good education, integration. We need this in our systems of education. Focusing on moralities and ethics itself can be a solution for climate change and other problems that we have it actually in our societies. Spreading awareness, as Dr. Ruhaida was talking about, spreading awareness and comprehensiveness in our families, in our schools, in our universities, and so on and so forth, in our communities and societies, and so on and so forth. The second point, be a role model. And to be a role model, there is some issues that I go to discuss it a little bit here. The first thing, do not abandon small deeds. The Prophet ﷺ said, means you can enter the Jannah, subhanAllah, is just by giving half of date to someone else. Half date means you cut it and you eat half and you give the second half to other one. It can save you from the Jahannam in the day of judgment. And therefore, we cannot abandon the small deeds in our life. We cannot, for example, say, as Dr. Noor was talking about, if I ride a bicycle, so what's the point? I'm not going to add anything to climate change. No, from Islamic perspective, we cannot abandon these small deeds in our life. And some scholars, they said the small deeds are the real matter, actually, because our life is a combination of these small deeds, actually. Okay, and always put in our mind that the others may see us, may follow us when we do this, may ask us, why are you doing this, and therefore we can be a role model for the others. The second thing, round the wind, do not conform the others' perceptions of society. Most of the time, this is when the people hide behind it, and they said, if I'm going to do this, and all the society are doing the round the wind, are doing the opposite, so what's the point? Why do I need to work for my own? Why do I need to work for my family and for example, protect the environment around me, not, for example, using my car too much? It's because of CO2, for example, and this and that. So we cannot look the society. We need to correct ourselves first. We need to look for ourselves and then how we can help our families and then so on and so forth. That's what I'm going to talk about it when I talk about the collective elements. And then people are watching you, and you may be a source of influence. We don't know in this life that sometimes your children, sometimes the people, sometimes even your students may see you and may follow you in what you are doing, and we don't know if they are going to follow us on this, on that. Therefore, keeping in mind that people are watching us, and therefore we can always provide a good example for that. And finally, Islam is universal, yes, but start with self also, starting by correcting ourselves and our actions while seeking the changes of others, actually. And this is another important point. When we talk about main elements in tackling the climate change collectively, the first thing, and cooperate in righteousness and pity. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى, means we must be together always to tackle such as issues like climate change, actually. The second thing, starting from closed zone. I'm happy to follow what other speakers were talking about, talking specifically about Malaysia, for example, and some places and some area. Actually, this is the way how we solve our problems. So we start from the closed zone. Why? Because it's very easy to handle that. If we start from the cities, from the streets, and then we move to cover Malaysia, for example, those are the steps how we can deal with these issues actually. And then we move to the regional level, cooperating with nearest countries and so on and so forth. It happened in this way better. But when we focus, for example, on international society, sometimes when focusing on international society, different countries means different interests. Maybe some of them, they don't care, is just talking about the events, and then after that, they forget about it. Or sometimes we may think that the others are going to solve problem for us. It's something international, therefore the others are going to solve this problem for us. Therefore, we don't need to think. Therefore, we don't need to deal with this issue of climate change anymore. For that, it is important from Islamic perspective to start from the closed zones, means to spread the awareness and to deal with the issues that we have it in our areas and in our country actually. And finally, get involved in other social forces, as Dr. Waheeda was talking about. Even Dr. Noor mentioned, for example, the ecosystem, the food security, the water, and so on and so forth. We must include all the experts. We must include all the scholars from different fields actually to cooperate in order to find the problem, in order to find solutions to the problems that we are facing. We must, for example, we must come out with a clear strategy, clear national strategy to classify all the problems caused by climate change, and how are we going to deal with that. The short-term causes are the short-term problems, and the long-term problems as well, in order to solve these issues and this climate change problem actually. And I stop here. Hopefully I make some thoughts and some ideas clear, and it's open actually for the future. And that's what is next. It's open for the future research, for future discussions, inshallah, for the future cooperation in order to solve the problem of climate change. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam, Dr. Ramzy Bandika. Thank you very much for highlighting the issues and the management approach from Islamic perspective. And I really can see that the gist is about Islamization of the South, and we need to do a small action, even though it's just a small action, but can give a huge impact to the community. And I believe in Islam that as long as we help each other, Allah will always help us in return for what this that we do for the purpose of Ummah. All right. Now we, alhamdulillah, we have come to the last session. It will be the Q&A session in the formal forum. So I would like to invite all the speakers to switch on the camera. Is that possible? Right. I just like to control a bit. All right, so I have few questions I have stratified based on the comments and response from the viewers as well as from the team. So they will, we're going to have 2 cycles of questions. So there will be 1 question per cycle. So minimally each speaker need to answer about 2 questions, right? First question I would like to ask Dr. Noor Atika. So Dr. Atika, we can see that basically from the previous trend of climate change and the current progress, we actually somehow already can actually predict what are the things to happen, especially when we're talking about flood. But we do realize that somehow rather from the news, from the recent flood disaster, actually the site of flood areas actually keep on changing. We can see that there's a recent one in Shah Alam this year, and also if you can see the current issue of flood, there are certain districts being involved compared to the previous one. So the question is that, are we really actually can predict the area that will involve in flood, or about the changes in terms of community medicine point of view?
Oh, okay. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, for example, Nahrim, they did flood mapping for Malaysia. So actually, if we can know, for example, how many distribution of rainfall in certain area, they can predict the flood, which area will be inundated.
All right. So indirectly we can predict. We can predict, right? All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Atika. Second question is Dr. Nurhaida. Dr. Nurhaida, as the head of climate change unit in IMR, how do you see the current position of our country, Malaysia, in terms of the preparation by the public as well as the government in facing this climate change if we compare to other countries? And is it effective so far?
Thank you, Dr. Saiful, for the question. Actually, the focal agency for managing climate change in Malaysia is under the Ministry of Environment and Water, or currently known as National Resource Environment and Climate Change. So they are the focal agency. Their responsibility is actually to coordinate the responses between several sectors. And if I'm not mistaken, there's around 6 sectors involved for the climate change mitigation and adaptation in Malaysia, including the energy sector, the forest, land use, agriculture, and lastly is actually for public health. So each agency have the coordinator in implementing activities for adaptation and mitigation. And for mitigation, it's more towards the main sectors, the energy, transportation, as well as the forestry. So as compared to other countries, I think we have actually achieve the target for our mitigation, but other countries and other regions, for Malaysia ourselves, we are not the first party. The first party, as should by just now by Dr. Ramzi, I think the first party, the one that contribute more carbon emission is actually the developed country. So they have more responsibility. They have to change with a monetary financial aids, the assistance in terms of technology and capacity building, the transfer of technology with other countries. So for Southeast Asia region, I think very much we are very much obliged to the Paris Agreement. In fact, Malaysia, we have ratified the Paris Agreement since the first introduced in 2015 or 2016, I think. So we have done much, but we are actually involving various stakeholders, especially the public, the NGO. For example, certain NGOs are involved in the reporting for the Malaysian communication to the UNFCCC, and I found that the Malaysian youth delegation, they are very committed in doing some of the works in adaptation and mitigation. So basically, the action towards climate change involves all stakeholders, not only Ministry of Health for the public health issues, but also other ministry as well.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Nurhaida. So we can say that we are actually in the progress of controlling the climate issue, and we are still at par at other nearby country, right? Thank you very much, Dr. Nurhaida. Another question to Dr. Ramzi. Dr. Ramzi, I think you did mention on your first slide regarding how we see or we view the issue of climate change. It could be a punishment, it could be actually a test from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. My question is that how actually we as a human can actually have some message or prediction. Is it something to do with punishment, or is it just a test, or it could be both? How we can actually predict or have some understanding about the message. Thank you, Dr. Ramzi.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saiful, for this question. Actually, the first thing that we need to understand that fixing one issue and saying that this is a punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not for us. Okay, it's not for a human being to decide if this is a punishment or not. The stories, for example, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it in the Quran about the previous nations and so on and so forth, it's an evidence. It's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't tell us that this is a punishment, therefore for us a human being, we cannot say that this is a punishment actually. But as I explained, sorry, concerning the test that coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah can test us with everything. And one of it that I believe that is one of the ways is, of course, the climate change. And as I said, it's a sign for us. Still, it's something rahmah, okay? Because we can use it as a way of measurement to understand what we are doing as a human being, how we can stop the others from doing so, how we can correct the actions and the behavior of a human being in order to become good and stop harming the environment and so on and so forth. And as you said, to decide on that is not in our hand, but at the same time, how we can use it for our favor, actually, to say this is ibtila from Allah, this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but what I can do as a human being, what I can correct about myself and about, as I explain it, about my family, about my community, and so on and so forth, and moving forward, in rather than just keep the same discussion over and over and over. Each time something happened to us, we go to that and we stuck on this discussion. Is it a punishment or a test? Is it a punishment or a test? So what we can benefit from this kind of discussion is we don't moving forward and benefit from that. Thank you, Dr. Hussain.
Right, thank you, Dr. Ramzi. So it's not our role actually to discuss on is this something, it could be a task, it could be punishment, but looking at the message from Allah for us to improve ourselves in every occasion, and also to be prepared for the things that could happen in the future. Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Ramzi. Now we go to the second cycle. I go back to Dr. Nur Atikah. So Dr. Nur Atikah, we can see that you mentioned just now that the flood or any climate change or the issue of disasters, sometimes we can predict from the study and statistics. I would like to ask, I think pertaining to our example in Kuantan, I think there are also issue of flood in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. So I think for the past 10 years, based on your research and also based on your literature, is there any ongoing project led by the government or even by the private sector pertaining to our local area to reduce the impact of flood during monsoon era?
I'm not sure, Dr. Saiful, because we are not working at the government agency. We are working at the university. But for me, my side, we are collecting data for climate and also diseases at Kuantan, for lacto and also food waterborne diseases.
How's about the trend of the infectious disease based on your study in Kuantan? Is it increasing in trend or is it controlled so far?
And we collected the data not only for Kuantan, actually, for the whole Pahang. So in terms of the distribution of dengue, the cases, if I'm not mistaken, not related to temperature, but related to other factors, including population factor, because in Kuantan there are highly populous compared to other districts.
How's about case of malaria? Is it increasing trend as well, as like mentioned by Dr. Raida just now?
We didn't collect data for malaria, only for food waterborne disease and also.
All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Rohaida, my second question to you. I think you did mention about climate change leadership skills. I think from your slide, you mentioned about the component of leadership there. May I know what actually the attributes of leadership that is required in managing this issue? And is there any, if you know of, any ongoing teamwork between our public sector and private sector, ongoing or even in future, to handle this climate change issue?
My answer would be towards public health. Even though I have collaboration and works with other agencies, but our sector is we are working within our sector as well. So for the leadership, for the public health, Ministry of Health is actually the leading agency for the public health sector, and we are working with other agencies as well, especially the university with Dr. Atika and a few others in the academic sectors. So in terms of leadership, the Ministry of Health, we have the platform for leading the environmental health issues. As I mentioned in one of my slides, the National Environmental Health Action Plan, or NEHAP, is being introduced by the Ministry of Health, but there's a few technical working group. So it's a total of 10 working groups, and the 5th working group is actually on the climate change and health. And we are leading in terms of doing activities, the SEPA just now, the public awareness and participation, and also some research. And currently for the TWG5 for climate change and health, we are doing some review on the research priority for climate change and health in Malaysia. So I would say that we need, for the leadership, we need collaboration with other sectors. And this would answer the second question, the teamwork. We are working, for example, even though IMR is actually the research wing for the Ministry of Health, our works is very much to answering the policy, to answering the program, as compared to the university. University Dr. Atika works probably is more towards academics and would have very much coverage as compared to us, because we are working for the policy. And in fact, for the vulnerability and adaptation assessment that we include in the national communication, we get the feedback from other universities as well, the academics, and we are working as well with the NGOs that addressing the climate change and health. For example, the Academy of Science Malaysia, and then the Malaysian Youth Delegation, and other NGOs as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rohaida, for that input. Now, I would like to ask another question to Dr. Ramzi. So, Dr. Ramzi, you did mention that when we face any task or any challenges, not only about climate change, first of all, we need to accept that that's already happened. Some people will take quite a long time. Some people still in the state of denial, and some of them might blaming others or even blaming themselves. My question is that how actually Islamization of the self can be initiated at this point of sadness or down, in order to fasting the episodes of denial, or in the face of accepting the situation, so that the people can move on and can finish the obstacles and the challenges. Dr. Ramzi.
Okay, thank you, Brother Shaifu, for this question. Actually, as I mentioned, is to accept something. Accepting something means is to understand our goal and our mission in this life. For that, sometimes, for example, in the past, when I talk to my students, specifically in the Kuliah of medicine, I said that because they start complaining that a lot of assessment, this and that. I said, you must understand one thing, that the stress is a part of life of students. if we cannot understand this, that the stress and the events and the things that happen to us is a part of our life, therefore we cannot move. And this is the first step toward anything that happened to us in the future, is the acceptance. And as I said, the acceptance is a part of our life. So if we don't like what happened to us, it's happening anyway. If we reject it, it's happening to us anyway. You see, so what's the best way to move toward that is to accept it as this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a test, or it's something that we adopted, and therefore we try to find solutions, and it will be very easy for us to deal with our problems if we accept it, rather than reject it or blaming others, or trying to find a shortcut how to escape it, and so on and so forth. Therefore, we are not dealing with reality. We are not dealing with ourselves, and we are not getting a good experience that we can be helpful in tackling the future problems and the future challenges. The life is a accumulation of experiences. Okay, it's a accumulation of experiences, and experience of what? Experience of dealing with the problems and dealing with ourselves, this problem, and we solve it, and then we correct ourselves in order to face another one, and so on and so forth. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, fi kabat, always there is something is going to face us. If we don't understand this, therefore the future will be very difficult for us to deal with in any issues, rather than climate change or something else. Hopefully I answered your question.
Right, thank you very much, Dr. Ramzy. All right, okay, Alhamdulillah, that's already second cycle of our discussion. Now for the last cycle, I would like to invite anyone from the Zoom meeting room to just voice out, and to the possible you would like to ask question to our beloved speakers. I think Dr. Yusuf already raised up his hand. He would like to ask question to the speakers. Dr. Yusuf.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Can you listen to me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry for my camera, it's not really good. MashaAllah, I try to open, you can't see me, just listen to the voice. I just have a simple question to Dr. Ramzy. The first question, two questions, but the first question already done, alhamdulillah. The second question is that sometimes in the cases of calamities or disaster, like we are having flood and etc., there are a lot of tendency of miracles, right? In the media, we can see some people are claiming Quran is not been soaked in the water, you know. Then there are few like mosques after the huge flood, they still retain the structure and etc. So for some, this is considered as miracle, but for others, it's considered this is not very specific, because we can find this in other faith as well, right? So how do we view this? Do we take this as part of the miracles, or we just take this like not as miracle, but just a normal things that happen during flood and etc. So what is your view, Dr. Ramzy?
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad Yusuf, for giving me this question. Why you would give me this kind of questions that can be for the scholars? Okay, so to answer this, the first thing, yes, things happen, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still show us some miracles happening here and there, but it's not at that level that people are talking about it actually. As I said in the beginning, sometimes we don't benefit from the event itself. Our target as Muslims, when something happened like that, is the first of all is to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the second step to avoid any any explanation which cannot find it in the Quran and the Sunnah, means we don't have any evidences about it. The Prophet ﷺ, as Ummuna Aisha radiallahu anha used to say, sometimes when he saw, for example, the heavy raining, he feel afraid, and most of the cases he couldn't see the raining itself. Why? Because he is afraid maybe this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a punishment, but it's a personal level, at the personal level. But we never ever, for example, heard the Prophet ﷺ say, do you see what happened? And it didn't happen in this way. and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected so and so, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did so and so. The main important thing, what we benefit from the event itself, what we benefit, how we correct ourselves starting from that event happen to us, even individually or collectively, actually. What the needs of the people at that time, actually. And this is, thank you, brother. Thank you, Dr. Muhammad Yusuf, for mentioning this. Sometimes people, as you said, are too busy, even the media are too busy with this kind of talks, punishment, tests. As you said, right now, the Mus'haf, nothing happened to the Mus'haf, and nothing happened to that mosque, and so on and so forth. But we forget about the people themselves during that event. How about the people? What are the first steps to help the people who are suffering at that moment? Okay, because at that moment, even the buildings themselves, even the things that we have themselves, it doesn't matter comparing to the life of people themselves. Okay, so we focus about what we can do about the people, how we can help them, and how we can solve that immediate issues rather than talking about something else. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the Mus'haf or protect the mosque is not always the case. You see, what does it mean? It's not always the case. We cannot focus on that and we take it as a miracle. Why? I will give you just some evidences from that. We can go and see some countries, what happened, for example, in Iraq and what happened in Syria. People destroyed so many mosques. What does it mean? Means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't protect it? Means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes what happened immediately? No. But it's always there is a reason there. Yeah, we accept it that those kind of things happen. Yes, but at the same time, we move on and we try to tackle the real issues that we have. This is the Islamic view of life. This is the real matter of life, is the actions and what we can do after that. And sorry for this long answer. I just remember, for example, what happened during the time of Umar radiallahu anhu as the Khalifa of the Prophet sallallahu, and during the epidemic, Al-Khalifa Umar radiallahu anhu didn't think about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected some people and not the others, or the mosque or something else. So immediately he started the measurement and some policies and some decisions in order to protect people of that city or outside that city. It's a question of behavior and the decisions, and at the same time the direct actions. That's what matter during this kind of events. And hopefully I answer your question, Doctor. Sorry if I made it wrong.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramzi, for that answer, and thank you very much to Dr. Yusuf for being active participant. Any more question from our Zoom viewers? You can introduce yourself and can ask question directly to the speaker if there's any burning question. Right, I see there is none as well from the chat box. So before we end, I would like to give any take-home message from each speaker, a short take-home message from each speaker. I'll start first with Dr. Atika. Dr. Atika, I think you need to unmute your mic first. Thank you.
Just a little bit take-home message. I think, for example, meteorological department, they give a lot of a warning to the community, but some of us, we still reluctant to leave our house, although we know that we might have floods in the next 24 hours, because they want to make sure that they want to take care of their house. But actually, MMD, they have already alerted the community. So I think we should consider when the government already gave announcement, so we have to take it seriously, because at the moment there are 5 deaths related to floods at Kelantan and also Terengganu in this week. Okay.
Right, thank you very much for the reminder, Dr. Atika. Dr. Rohaida Ismail, any take-home message from your side?
From IMR, we are the Institute for Medical Research. So I would say that Climate change, from the perspective of science, is evidence. So as well as the human health impact. So we have evidence on that. The simple one we have to act now to ensure that our future generation in the next 50 years, 100 years will be protected from the impact of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rohaida. Dr. Ramzi Bandika, any take-home message from you? Probably you need to unmute first, Dr. Ramzi.
Thank you, and thank you again for inviting me to this workshop. The message is, the title itself is that the climate change is for real, and we must take it in consideration. And as I said, hopefully in the future, inshallah, we will have more events like that, and we cooperate in order to deal with such as issues from different aspects and from different perspectives, inshallah. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah, thank you very much. I would like to express my appreciation and thank you to all the speakers, Dr. Nur Atiqah Hassan from Community Medicine Department IUM, Dr. Rohaida Ismail, the head of the Climate Change Unit from IMR, and also Dr. Ramzi Bandika from IUM Gombak for able to contribute in the discussion. I'm really happy that we have the input and complete the algorithm of facing these challenges from the biological, psychological, social, and spiritual approach of facing this climate change. I would like also to apologize. I'm sure there's a limitation from my side. I'm sorry for everything, and hope we can have another further fruitful discussion in future regarding a new issue related with climate change. With that, let us end our session with Tasbih Farah also to us. To all medical doctors, thank you for staying until now. We would like to share the QR scan code for the CPD points. Thank you, and Assalamualaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.